Lee Hyun is a criminal psychology expert studying abroad in the US. One day, he unexpectedly receives an email from someone claiming to be a demon. This name evokes a haunting memory in him. The demon challenges Lee Hyun to find him. If Lee Hyun succeeds, the demon will reveal a secret that has been sealed away in the past. Currently, the demon is committing a series of murders. At each crime scene, he leaves a clue. If Lee Hyun can piece these clues together, the real demon will appear. Just as he said, a few days ago, the police station was in chaos after receiving information about a murder. This young police officer, Gian, and her colleagues quickly arrived at the scene. According to preliminary assessments, this was the latest case in a series of serial murders that had been baffling the police for the past few days. They found no murder weapon, fingerprints, or any other evidence of the killer. The victim died from a single fatal stab wound. The killer also strangled the victim to death. However, the killer meticulously cleaned the bloodstains from the victims' bodies. He seemed to be extremely clean. This was the only information the police had. At the crime scene, Gian encountered Lee Hyun. She found him incredibly familiar, having followed him since childhood, but each time she lost track of him. Now, Lee Hyun was mistaken for the newly appointed captain, so he fulfilled his duty. He presented his analysis to the police, which matched the information they already had. However, the most crucial detail remained undiscovered. Each crime scene had a code that helped them pinpoint the location of the next crime. As soon as Lee Hyun landed at the airport, he received photos of the previous crime scene, each containing a code. Based on this, he deduced the coordinates of this latest crime scene, but beyond that, there were no other clues. So how do they catch the culprit? A few days ago, Lee Hyun received an anonymous email containing photos of a crime scene. He deduced that someone was challenging him because the killer's methods were very similar to the murder that occurred in his house many years ago. At that time, Lee Hyun's father was also a criminal psychologist. He was investigating an extremely dangerous criminal named Jun Young, one of those with an above-average IQ. He had miraculously managed to handcuff the prison guard, who was furious but powerless against the culprit. By chance, Jun Young met Lee Hyun and realized the boy also possessed exceptional intelligence. From a young age, Lee Hyun displayed extraordinary abilities. He could perform mental calculations incredibly quickly. He could tell the individual divination numbers in a box at a glance, astonishing everyone. That time, Lee Hyun went to the interrogation room to bring something for his father, but he wasn't there, so the boy encountered the criminal Jun Young and was manipulated by him. When Lee Hyun's father discovered this, the criminal deliberately stared at him, making him angry. He dragged Lee Hyun out of the cell. Afterwards, the father returned to the cell and asked Jun Young what he had said to Lee Hyun, but Jun Young said nothing, only laughed mockingly. Lee Hyun's father angrily confronted Jun Young and taught him a lesson. However, he also began to have doubts. He wrote in his diary that perhaps his son was a monster. Knowing this, Lee Hyun was very sad. He put away the diary, along with many unspoken thoughts. The next day, his father wanted to hide him in the basement. This made him even sadder. In reality, his father only wanted him to be a normal person. Back to reality. Suddenly there was a noise upstairs. The police immediately became alert. Someone approached the door. This was the real captain. The police turned to arrest Lee Hyun, suspecting him of being the culprit who had come to cover up the evidence. But he had disappeared. Seeing this, Gian quickly chased after him. He calmly got into his car and drove away. It wasn't until Gian called out Lee Hyun's name that he stopped the car. Then he crouched in a corner, nearly falling over. Luckily, he managed to catch himself in time. The two looked at each other intently. He expected a thank you, but instead, she handcuffed him and took him to the police station. In the interrogation room, Gian asked why Lee Hyun was at the scene. He said someone had informed him via email. After confirming the information and learning Lee Hyun's true identity, the police had no reason to detain him. Afterwards, he returned home and looked back at the house where his father had been murdered years ago. His younger brother was missing. He felt a little sad. He started cleaning the house. At this point, he discovered that someone had broken in. His father's diary, which he had hidden for many years, was missing. However, he found several audio tapes. This is his father's interrogation of the murderer from many years ago. Unexpectedly, Lee Hyun receives a phone call. After learning of Lee Hyun's identity and abilities, the police want him to assist them in solving the case. But it seems Gian isn't being honest enough, so Lee Hyun doesn't bother. With his abilities, he can solve the case himself. His colleagues might just be an obstacle. Moreover, he already knows who the criminal is. He wants to settle the score with the killer from 19 years ago. The real secret of the criminal Jun Young, known only to Lee Hyun, is that he has no arteries in his neck. Taking advantage of this, Jun Young used a knife to do something reckless. Then, on the way to the hospital, he tried to escape from prison. The person in the ambulance was also his accomplice. By the time the prisoner realized it, it was too late. After successfully escaping, he went to Lee Hyun's house. Lee Hyun's father, anticipating the situation, hid the boy in the basement. Now he wanted to sit down down and talk with Jun Young, but Jun Young only wanted to see Lee Hyun. A fight broke out between the two, neither willing to back down. Lee Hyun, hearing the commotion in the basement, was extremely worried about his father. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun's younger brother, Lee Min, was also awakened by the noise. Seeing the criminal, the boy fearfully fled to the window. At this moment, Lee Hyun finally managed to open the basement door. Outside, he saw his father lying in a pool of blood. Jun Young smiled at Lee Hyun. He wanted to see what kind of person the boy, with his intelligence, would become when he grew up, so he spared Lee Hyun's life. Afterwards, the boy ran to find his brother and accidentally tripped and fell. He lost all his memories from that point on. However, he could never forget his father's death. Returning to reality, Lee Hyun remembered something Jun Young had said. "When I grow up, I will definitely come to find you." But Jun Young still hadn't appeared. Lee Hyun had no choice but to let his brother's information leak online. He hoped Jun Young would come to see him one day. At this time, the police were racking their brains over the serial murders. They had no clues about the killer. Suddenly, they remembered Lee Hyun. They really needed his help. At this point, Gian decided to use her charm to seduce Lee Hyun into joining their team. The next day, she went to school to find him. He was giving a lecture on criminal psychology to the students. She entered the classroom and tried to get his attention, but he was so focused on the lecture that he didn't notice her. She accidentally played on the slide in the classroom, making everyone laugh. Lee Hyun even made fun of her afterwards. However, she didn't seem to get angry. After class, she followed him, trying to win his favor and get information about the case. Finally, he agreed, giving her a hint, a purple flower, symbolizing eternal love. The killer is a nymphomaniac obsessed with eunuchs, hunting for victims who resemble his former lover who abandoned him. Therefore, he chose strangulation as the method, ensuring the victims' bodies were as intact as possible. Lee Hyun also noticed a common characteristic among the victims. They were all female with short hair. The second victim was murdered immediately after getting a haircut. The killer may have killed many people, but his hatred was directed towards only one person, his former lover. Based on this analysis, Lee Hyun asked Gian if she could guess where the killer targeted his victims. She only smiled. Lee Hyun then revealed the final clue. The victims targeted by the killer often appeared at beauty salons or marriage brokerage centers to find partners. That evening, Lee Hyun visited his adoptive mother, who is currently the chief of the Seoul Police Department. 19 years ago, Lee Hyun's father was her senior. After his death, she adopted Lee Hyun. Now Lee Hyun wanted to ask his adoptive mother about his biological father's case file, but she said it had been destroyed many years ago. At that time, her superiors had stopped the investigation into the case. Lee Hyun felt something was wrong, but he didn't say anything to avoid upsetting his mother. Meanwhile, Gian arrived at the second crime scene to look for clues. According to Lee Hyun, the killer would leave information about the next crime scene there. Gian, a police officer, wasn't afraid of people, but she was afraid of ghosts. The wind blowing through the door sent chills down her spine, so she lay down and slept there until morning. When morning came, Gian could see the scene clearly. She discovered a clue left by the killer. On the refrigerator door was a coded message. She was overjoyed and reported it to the police team. They deciphered it and found the next crime scene on an island. Why did the killer move the crime scene from Seoul to an island? It's strange. At this point, Gian went to see Lee Hyun and told him to decipher the coded message, which gave a completely different result from the police. The location was still within Seoul. Just changing the longitude and latitude would reveal it. He was helpless. Immediately afterward, Gian set off. This time, she was determined to catch the killer. The police quickly traced the owner of the house at that location. Gian called the girl. Fortunately, she was still alive, but the killer was also inside the house. Gian advised the girl to stay calm so she could have time to come to her rescue, but the girl acted impulsively and attacked the killer. She was immediately subdued by him. When Gian arrived, she found the killer still there, and the girl was unconscious on the ground. Luckily, she was still alive. Gian pointed her gun at the killer, forcing him to surrender. He didn't seem afraid at all, and even stood there laughing. She then brought the perpetrator to the police station for questioning. Unexpectedly, he came from an extremely powerful family. He was the son of one of the wealthiest tycoons in South Korea. His grandfather was a member of parliament. This time, the tycoon didn't hire a lawyer. He showed particular favoritism towards women, which is why he allowed Gian to interrogate him. He even readily answered her questions. However, he brazenly claimed that he was the one who had been attacked first. Lee Hyun observed the entire interrogation from the sidelines. He realized this wasn't the person he was looking for. Only then did the police notice Lee Hyun's presence. Lee Hyun once again criticized the police. One officer, enraged, tried to attack Lee Hyun, but was restrained by his colleagues. Lee Hyun didn't want to create more animosity, so he stood aside and continued observing the interrogation. Meanwhile, the girl who had been attacked by the tycoon woke up in the hospital and immediately recognized the doctor standing before her. He gave her a strange smile. It seemed he had threatened threatened her in some way. So when the police came to take her statement, the girl refused to testify. She even claimed she was the one who had attacked the tycoon first. The police knew someone was threatening the girl. He remembered a suspicious doctor he had just encountered outside the door. He rushed out but lost sight of him. The next day, the police continued to interrogate the tycoon. This time, Gian posed as an intern and volunteered to participate in the interrogation. Seeing his naive demeanor, the tycoon dismissed him. But with his intelligence, Gian quickly grasped the tycoon's weakness. Gian produced several photos. These were the women the tycoon had killed, including his former lover whom he hated. He hadn't just committed the 2 recent murders, he had killed many people before, using money and power to bribe high-ranking police officers. Afterward, he was quickly manipulated by Gian. Gian revealed that someone had recently been directing the tycoon to intentionally leave clues for the police at the crime scene. The other person's goal was to draw the police into a game of wits. The tycoon, in reality, was just a useless person who had been dumped by his girlfriend. He was furious when the truth was revealed. He confessed to all the crimes himself, claiming no one directed him. But Gian didn't give up and continued his investigation. Just as they were about to get more information, his defense lawyer unexpectedly appeared and helped him regain his composure. From then on, Gian couldn't get any more information. The tycoon brazenly denied his earlier confession, claiming he was suffering from a mental illness and that the police had coerced him into confessing out of sheer fear. Their only chance to arrest him was lost, so the police had to release him. In the restroom, he even threatened Gian, saying, "I'll kill you in an even more perfect way." Gian was really looking forward to seeing what he would do. The monster within Gian was also rising. Then Gian told Gian, "I'll help you kill him." She thought it was just a joke, so she joked back, "Then I'll be ready to go and catch you too." Gian borrowed Gian's computer to send an email. The next day, the tycoon boarded a plane and fled to China. Gian immediately called him and said, "Aren't you going to kill me here anymore?" He laughed and said, "Wait until things calm down, then I'll come back and fulfill my promise." Gian advised him to stay, otherwise he wouldn't have another chance, but he still left. Just as Gian predicted, as soon as he landed at a Chinese airport, the tycoon was arrested by the police for drug possession. Abroad, he had no one to protect him, so he would go to jail. The person who informed the Chinese customs was none other than Gian. Unexpectedly, Gian had extensive connections. Gian used Gian as a scapegoat. She arrived at his house extremely angry. At that moment, he realized something was wrong. Could she have been to his house before? He kept questioning her. Faced with his barrage of questions, she didn't know how to explain herself properly. She lied, saying she was a fellow fan of his, and that's how she knew all his information. He angrily kicked her out. Meanwhile, the deputy director of the police department learned about the emails sent to Chinese customs. Gian bore the brunt of the outrage. She was transferred to the public relations department. She found the work there incredibly boring. She felt she was better suited to investigating crimes. That evening, a murder occurred. The man in black left, abandoning the victim at the scene, but he seemed mentally unstable, constantly muttering, "I really didn't want to kill anyone." At this moment, Gian received a call. It was from a police officer who worked with Gian's father. He wanted to meet Gian to give him some clues about the criminal Jun Young from 19 years ago. Gian asked for his address so he could meet him. Gian immediately set off. While he was reviewing the clues he had gathered, someone suddenly rang the doorbell. Thinking it was Gian, he opened the door. Unexpectedly, it was the killer in the black suit. The man lunged at him and stabbed him, severely injuring him. Now Gian also went to his house and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. The man in the black suit saw someone approaching and fled. Gian tried calling him again. Gian heard the phone in the room ringing, but no one answered. Suspicious, Gian opened the door and found him lying there barely alive. Gian quickly called for an ambulance. Suddenly, there was a noise in the corner. Gian went closer to investigate. The man in the black suit lunged out, intending to attack Gian as well. Gian quickly fought back, repeatedly overpowering the man in the black suit. Seeing this, the man in the black suit jumped out the window and escaped. Gian didn't chase after him. He wanted to find clues about the murderer from 19 years ago that the old man had mentioned. The clues were in the corner of a cupboard, but Gian couldn't find them. He then left the house. An ambulance and police quickly arrived at the scene. The old man was dead, and the police found a car nearby containing a black box recording who was in the area at the time of the murder. They discovered Gian had just left the house, so they considered him a suspect. Gian was furious when she learned of this. She couldn't believe he was the one who committed the crime. When she returned home, Gian was already waiting for her. He said he wasn't the murderer and asked if he could stay with her temporarily. She wanted to call the police, but she couldn't because she believed he wasn't the killer. Although it was difficult, she decided to let him stay. That evening, the two of them went to the crime scene to find evidence to exonerate Gian. He found a pill under the bed. He didn't know what it was. Suddenly, someone else arrived. Lee Hyun pulled Gian behind the closet. Unexpectedly, the people who came were two police officers from his team. They wanted to find more evidence. Both believed Lee Hyun wasn't the killer. They talked about his unfriendly attitude and about Jian's appearance. Being criticized, she suddenly hiccuped. The two officers discovered someone hiding in the closet. They cautiously approached to investigate, so Gian had to come out. She didn't want her colleagues to discover Lee Hyun, but her colleagues still suspected there was someone in the closet. Gian used the colleagues' comments about her appearance as an excuse to tease him. She successfully led her colleague away and helped Lee Hyun avoid being discovered. After Gian pulled the police officers away, Lee Hyun came out to continue analyzing the case. The victim had many stab wounds. The victim was stabbed multiple times but didn't resist. Perhaps he knew the killer. The medicine Lee Hyun picked up earlier was a cancer cell inhibitor. If Lee Hyun wasn't mistaken, this was a case of personal revenge. The victim must have done something wrong to the perpetrator, and he wanted to pay the price before dying of cancer. At this moment, Gian returned home and found Lee Hyun had arrived before her. She warned him not to do anything to her tonight, and he agreed. She noticed he was injured, so she applied medicine and bandaged his wounds. He fell asleep. Gian finally got to admire Lee Hyun up close and found him quite handsome. She then lay down beside him and fell asleep. When Lee Hyun woke up and saw her, he smiled. He carried her to bed. The next morning, Lee Hyun even cooked for her himself. She ate with great relish, but she kept spilling food. Lee Hyun, being a clean freak, couldn't stand this, so every time she spilled food, he would immediately wipe it up with a napkin. He remembered doing the same thing to his younger brother when he was a child. He fell into deep thought. He wanted to find his brother again. After being served a meal, he gave her a task. She went to the office to retrieve some documents related to the deceased police officer. These were files of cases he had been involved in. It was possible that the murderer was one of the criminals he had been arrested for. After being released from prison, the murderer came to seek revenge. That evening, Gian brought the documents she had obtained back to Lee Hyun. They sat together and reviewed them. Gian was so tired that she fell asleep without realizing it. Early the next morning, she received news. Another police officer had passed away. Hearing this person's name, Lee Hyun immediately remembered it from the documents from the previous day. The two deceased police officers had investigated the same case, a family tragedy. A mother and her child had died. The husband returned and discovered them too late. He hugged his wife and wept uncontrollably. But at that time, the husband was convicted of murdering his wife and child. The police found his fingerprints on the murder weapon. Along with neighbors saying the family often argued, they believed that was the motive. The husband was wrongly imprisoned. The family had a 10-year-old son who miraculously survived. Lee Hyun recalled his own situation and Junyoung's words from the day his father was murdered. What would the only surviving child do? Gian believed the son of that family was seeking revenge. Having lost a loved one and become the son of a murderer, how many could possibly overcome that? At this point, Gian went to find the wrongfully imprisoned husband. There, they met the lawyer defending him. Why hadn't he sought legal help for so many years? Only now. Something seemed off about this lawyer. Lee Hyun knew this man would be his long-term enemy. Gian entered the interrogation room to question the wrongfully accused husband. Lee Hyun claimed he wasn't the real culprit in the murder that year. However, he insisted he was the one who killed his wife and daughter. When Lee Hyun showed him a photo of his murdered wife, the man became distraught and couldn't bear to look at it. Given his demeanor, could he really be the kind of person who would brutally murder his wife and daughter? Now, Lee Hyun said his son was carrying out a revenge plan to kill the police officers who wrongly arrested him. Lee Hyun even said he wanted to catch the real killer. This enraged the man, causing him to jump up. He said his son wasn't that kind of person, but the truth proved his son was the murderer of the police officers. Seeing that he was visibly agitated, Lee Hyun handed the rest of the work over to Gian. Gian was very gentle with him. She recounted her unhappy childhood. Her father had taken the criminal Junyoung to the hospital 19 years ago. After Junyoung escaped, her father also disappeared. He was accused of being an accomplice. At that time, Gian was still young and faced a lot of criticism. People considered her the daughter of a criminal. Everyone hated her intensely. Recalling this was very distressing for Gian, but she overcame the circumstances and became the exemplary police officer she is today. If a person's conscience is clear, they can all be good people. Gian wanted to help him find his son. Then she wanted to persuade his son to reform and become an honest person, not a cruel murderer. Gian obtained his son's address and sent it to her colleagues. The police quickly went to arrest him. They broke into the house and found no one inside. However, they also found their next target, the police chief. They quickly notified another police team and headed back to the police chief's house. At that moment, the man in black arrived at the police chief's house and broke in, but the person there was the captain of the police team. The captain quickly subdued the man in black. When his teammates rushed in, he had already already dealt with the situation neatly. They simply put the man in black into the police car and took him to the station. After solving the case, everyone asked the deputy director to allow Gian to return to the team. If it weren't for her, this case wouldn't have been solved. The police chief might even have lost his life. Seeing everyone's solidarity, the deputy director had no choice but to agree. The next day, Lee Hun went to the police chief's house. According to Jun Young's theory to Lee Hun earlier, the last surviving person must have some secret. The police chief also admitted that he had falsified the case file to send the man to prison. The reason was simple: a useless person replaced a useful one. His subordinate was a gangster who came to collect a debt and attacked the wife and child of the man wearing glasses. But the gangster was an indispensable source of income. How could the police chief possibly let him go to jail with his bottomless pockets? The chief didn't want to discuss this further. That year, Lee Hun's father also falsified Jun Young's case file to get him in prison. Lee Hun's father knew Jun Young was the perpetrator of several murders without bodies, but they lacked evidence to arrest him. So, Lee Hun's father fabricated evidence to frame him for murder and robbery just to get Jun Young imprisoned, preventing him from harming more people. It was a good deed, but the method was against the conscience of a police officer. The chief then asked Lee Hun if he remembered anything about his mother's death. Unexpectedly, Lee Hun had lost his memory not just once when his father was murdered, but twice since his mother's death. Suddenly, someone attacked him from behind, causing him to faint. In his hazy state, he vaguely remembered a purple flower appearing in his memory of his mother's death. Later, he woke up with a jumbled mess in his head. He found that no one else was there. He found a painting of a purple flower that someone had deliberately left behind. This was definitely related to the criminal Jun Young. The next day, Lee Hun had a teaching session at school. Gian and the team leader came to see him, but he had an appointment with a student. This student wanted his advice. Does the son of a murderer have a tendency to become a murderer himself? That's a personal choice, not related to bloodline. Lee Hun explained it to the boy and gave him a piece of paper. This was his contact information. After that, Lee Hun finally had time for the team leader and Gian. The team leader wanted Lee Hun to become an investigative consultant for the team with a salary of 5 million won. Fortunately, he accepted. Afterwards, Gian pulled Lee Hun aside to talk. She asked him if he had remembered things from the past. He admitted that he had recovered his memories since finding the case file on Jun Young in Jian's room. She asked if he was investigating Jun Young. She said they could work together to catch the culprit. He thought she was so foolish. What could she possibly do to help him? But seeing her insistence, he reluctantly agreed. That evening, another crime occurred. When the police arrived at the scene, they found one dead and one injured. The injured person was Lee Hyun, the student they had met that morning. The boy kept confessing to being the murderer. On the bus taking the student to the hospital, the police found a piece of paper containing Lee Hyun's contact information. The police quickly contacted Lee Hyun because the boy no longer had a guardian. At that moment, Lee Hyun was having dinner with the forensic team. They were newly acquainted neighbors. Upon receiving the call, Lee Hyun hurriedly got up and went to the hospital. The forensic team wanted to go along. When the two arrived at the hospital, the police said the student had confessed. Lee Hyun called his lawyer to represent the boy. This came as a complete surprise to him. When the lawyer arrived at the hospital, he met the forensic staff. Unexpectedly, the two knew each other. There was definitely something fishy going on between them. Lee Hun and Gian went to the crime scene. Based on the bloodstains on the wall, they guessed the killer was right-handed. Lee Hun remembered his student was left-handed. They needed more evidence to exonerate the boy. Now, Lee Hun noticed something unusual about the bloodstains on the floor. Based on that, he reconstructed the crime scene. The real killer murdered the man, and then the student discovered and stopped him. He only accidentally injured the boy. The killer and the student knew each other, so the killer didn't kill the boy. The boy also confessed to cover for the killer. Thus, the student would be charged with complicity if he refused to reveal the real killer. At this point, the police found a suspect through a camera near the crime scene. They quickly identified this person as a close friend of the student. Furthermore, he was a delinquent student with a criminal record for violent crimes. The police quickly went to arrest him. Upon seeing the police, the delinquent student frantically tried to run away. However, the police split into two groups and blocked his path. He resisted, injuring Gian, but she eventually subdued him. He was then taken to the police station for questioning. His family story was quite dramatic. Since childhood, his mother had kept the murder of his biological father a secret from him, so he investigated on his own to find out who his father was. However, he mistakenly believed that the murderer was his own father. In reality, the murderer was the biological father of the student currently hospitalized. The murderer had ordered the delinquent student to commit the crime. Upon learning this, the good student felt guilty and took the blame. Lee Hun recounted this entire story to the delinquent student in the interrogation room. He couldn't believe it was was true. But when Lian showed him the evidence, he was utterly shocked. Finally, he confessed. After the case concluded, Lian visited the good student in the hospital. Lian's reason for caring for the boy so wholeheartedly was that he saw a part of himself in him. He was always afraid of becoming a murderous monster. He wanted the boy to live a good life. Unfortunately, the boy couldn't survive. Lian brought the death certificate to the boy's father, who was in prison. Because of his actions of using others as a tool to kill, he unintentionally pushed his son to his death. He was incredibly distressed, never realizing that he had caused his son's death. He had to bear the pain of his own actions. The next day, Gian came to find Lian to ask him to go to the movies. He agreed, and they officially started dating. She shyly rode away on her bike. Seeing this, he could only force a smile. However, deep down, he felt a little happier and smiled more broadly. She prepared meticulously for their first date. They met at the movie theater, but knowing he disliked crowded places, she took him to an abandoned amusement park. They had a great time together. Suddenly, Lian discovered someone was following them. He chased after them but lost track of them. This person was a henchman of the lawyer who was spying on them. At that moment, Gian was shopping at the supermarket when she coincidentally met the lawyer. Because her car had broken down, he gave her a ride home. Lian then received a red envelope containing a strange drawing. The drawing resembled the purple flower he had seen before. Someone was challenging Lian again. He wanted to call Gian to confirm something, but she didn't answer. He realized something was wrong and rushed to her house. Just then, Gian returned from shopping when someone suddenly appeared behind her, startling her. The man in black attacked Gian. She tried to resist, but compared to her health, she couldn't do anything. Luckily, the lawyer arrived just in time. He wanted to return the items she'd dropped in the car, but this was actually his plan. He pretended to fight with the man in black for a while, then told him to go ahead. Outside, the man in black ran into Lian. However, worried about Gian, Lian didn't chase after him. Lian went inside and found the lawyer there as well. The two of them took Gian to the hospital first. Then Lian asked the lawyer why he was at Gian's house. He said it was completely coincidental. They met by chance at the supermarket. Her car broke down, so he gave her a ride. He returned to return the items and coincidentally saw her being attacked, so he rescued her. Lian didn't believe there could be so many coincidences in the world. Lian asked if he had orchestrated it. Was he trying to get close to Gian? The lawyer confessed that he was only trying to get closer to Gian, but Lian still felt he was untrustworthy. When Gian woke up, she was discharged from the hospital. Lian took her to his house to protect her. In the middle of the night, while sleeping, she heard someone's voice and woke up. It turned out Lian was having a nightmare. He dreamt that his younger brother was being kidnapped. He kept calling her name. Gian felt sorry for him. She reached out her hand, and he instinctively grasped it tightly. The next day, Gian arranged to meet the lawyer to thank him. She asked if he cared about her. He readily replied that she was the second person in the world to receive his attention. She thought the first was his first love, but unexpectedly, the first was his older brother. This lawyer was Li Min, the younger brother Li Hyun had been searching for all this time. That day, Li Min was kidnapped by the criminal Jun Young. Afterward, Li Min was raised by him. But what reason did Li Min have for not directly acknowledging his brother? This was also what caused Li Min immense distress, because Li Min wanted Li Hyun to remember him, but Li Hyun didn't even recognize him. At this time, Li Hyun began investigating Jun Young's unsolved murder cases. Using clues from the two previous paintings, Li Hyun went to a port. He applied for a job there to facilitate his investigation. Then he accidentally discovered bloodstains on a cargo container. When he opened it, he found a body. He notified his teammates to solve the case. The deceased was identified as the female manager of the port. The killer hid the body in the cargo container and marked it. While the cargo ship was passing through the sea, he threw the body away to dispose of it. This was certainly the conclusion of an unsolved murder case. This time, it was definitely related to the criminal Jun Young. Now, the police discovered an employee attempting to flee the scene. He immediately apprehended this person and brought him to the police station for questioning. It didn't take long for him to quickly confess that he was the one who killed the female director. Li Hyun found this unusual. Those who quickly confess are usually just stand-ins. Li Hyun entered the interrogation room, closed the door, and turned off all the cameras. No one would know what happened next. Now Li Hyun asked if he was the one who transported the bodies from the murder case to dispose of them. The employee admitted to killing the female director because she saw him putting the body into a container. Once at sea, someone else would dispose of the body. Li Hyun asked who ordered him to do it, but he didn't know who it was. He could only remember the person's voice. Then Li Hyun took out a picture of the police chief and asked if there had been any bodies of this person recently. The employee immediately recognized that there had indeed been. He had helped the man transport so many bodies before. The employee fiddled with the string of beads on his wrist. Each time he transported a body, he would thread one bead onto this string of beads. Another crucial crucial detail is that each body is marked with a special symbol. After the interrogation, the employee is taken to jail. On the way, he meets lawyer Lee Min, who is looking for Gian. Hearing Lee Min's voice, the employee immediately recognizes him as the person who instructed him to hide the bodies. Meanwhile, the police find another female body by the riverbank. The method of murder is brutal, but afterwards, the killer wipes the blood off the victim's body. Either he wants to conceal evidence, or he regrets his actions. The police begin investigating the case. Through cameras near the scene, they discover a car that dumped the victim's body. However, the license plate is fake. Recently, there have been many mysterious disappearances. The victims are all young women. Perhaps this victim is one of them. Meanwhile, a beautiful young woman is practicing yoga at home. When she opens her closet, she discovers someone has planted a tracking device inside. She immediately reports it to the police, but she was foolish not to stay inside. She ran outside to wait. Suddenly, a car arrived and dragged the girl into it. It's easy to imagine the criminal's tactic this time: stalking, kidnapping, and then murdering the victim. The girl was taken to an abandoned area. When she regained consciousness, she was terrified, but she kept cursing the kidnapper. She demanded to see him. Unexpectedly, the kidnapper was a woman. At this time, the police also arrived at the scene of the kidnapping. They found a hidden camera in the room. Only the girl and the homeowner had the key to the room. The police wanted to get information from the homeowner, but she insisted she hadn't entered the girl's room. So, could someone have touched her house keys? The homeowner still insisted she hadn't. But immediately after leaving, she hurriedly called her son and asked if he had touched her bunch of keys. The fat man said he had used it before. Two police officers overheard this just as he returned home. Seeing the police, he tried to run away, but because he was so fat, he couldn't escape. He was taken to the police station for questioning. Lee Hun showed him photos of the victims, and the fat man claimed they were all his former lovers. It turned out he suffered from delusional love. He thought everyone seemed to like him. Taking advantage of this, Gian tried to use a honey trap to interrogate him. Immediately, he revealed crucial information. He regularly recorded videos of girls and kept them on his computer in his private room. Perhaps among them was a video of the kidnapper. The police searched the fat man's computer for information. Unexpectedly, he had recorded videos of girls showering and posted them on the dark web for everyone to see. Meanwhile, Lee Hun had a lunch date with lawyer Lee Min at his home. Lee Min returned home after many years away. He recalled memories with his older brother, but now, with his hand disfigured, he didn't dare acknowledge his brother. Unexpectedly, Lee Hyun had even invited the forensic doctor, their neighbor, to this meal. Lee Min and the doctor were very surprised to meet there. It seemed Lee Hyun was planning something, which is why he arranged for the two of them to meet. Meanwhile, Gian and the captain, based on the fat man's words, found a car with similar characteristics to the kidnappers. At the house of one of the victim's ex-girlfriends, a man suddenly attacked them, putting them both on the defensive. The captain was beaten badly. Seeing this, Gian threatened him with her gun. Suddenly, a woman attacked her from behind, causing her to faint. This woman was the kidnapper, and the man was her accomplice. The captain was stabbed and seriously wounded. Helplessly, he lay on the ground watching as the man took Gian away. Afterward, the captain called his teammates to report the news. They rushed to the rescue. At the same time, they anxiously searched for Gian. The captain was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, his life was not in danger. At this time, Lee Hun also received the news and hurriedly wanted to go to the scene. Lee Min and the forensic doctor, upon hearing the news, wanted to help Lee Hyun find Gian. With the help of these two intelligent people, the hope of finding Gian would probably be higher. Thinking this, Lee Hyun agreed to accept their help. The three of them got into a car and went to the scene. Upon arrival, they all questioned the homeowner. The person who kidnapped Gian was his younger brother, so the homeowner said it was entirely his doing. Lee Hyun left helplessly. Afterwards, Lee Hyun used the locations where the victims had been found previously to create a golden triangle. The killer would commit the crime at a fixed location within the triangle and then dispose of the body in the surrounding areas. This location had to be under the killer's ownership. After careful analysis, Lee Hyun identified the most likely location, a junkyard. The three of them set off for there. Meanwhile, Gian woke up from her coma and found herself in the junkyard with the kidnapped girl. The woman who kidnapped them approached. She was a deranged woman being manipulated by the man. She was also the one wiping the blood from the victims' bodies. Gian felt pity for the murdered victims. She tried to manipulate the woman psychologically, but it seemed impossible. The man also arrived and said someone would die today. Gian wanted him to target her to protect the girl, so she provoked him with her words. The reason he killed women was because his gun was broken. He was angry because he couldn't harm women, so he resorted to murder. Hearing Gian's contemptuous words, he became enraged and dragged her out to torture her. But Gian didn't give up and kept resisting. The man threw her to the ground. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun's group arrived at the junkyard. Lee Hyun and Min ran inside to rescue Gian, leaving the forensic doctor to hold told off the woman outside. She pointed her gun at the doctor. Luckily, the police arrived in time to save the day. Inside, Lee Hyun and Lee Min took turns attacking the man. They worked together seamlessly and quickly subdued him. Gian then untied the other woman. The police arrived and took the man to the police station. He confessed to everything he had done. The woman, however, didn't actually want to commit such a crime, but was forced to. Lee Hyun discovered that these two people suffered from contagious mental illness. The man was a heartless killer, and the woman, being his lover, had also been infected with his nature. Now, Lee Hyun began to think about Lee Min. Suppose Lee Min was kidnapped and raised by Jun Young. Would Lee Min also contract his murderous tendencies? The next day, everyone visited Gian at the hospital. She was recovering very well. Lee Hyun felt happy that Gian was safe and sound. When Gian was discharged, Lee Hyun came to pick her up and take her to his house. From now on, she wouldn't have to go anywhere anymore. She had to stay here so he could protect her safety. This moved her deeply. She leaned in and kissed him. She shyly returned to her room. He was overjoyed. Suddenly, he noticed a notebook someone had placed on the table. It was a document related to the criminal Jun Young that the deceased police officer had wanted to give him earlier. Lee Hyun thought to himself that someone seemed to want to end this game. He gave the notebook to Gian and told her that Jun Young seemed to have been here before. This surprised her greatly. The next day, the two of them were on their way to the scene of the mysterious disappearance of 13 members of a family. This case is recorded in that black notebook. It's directly related to Jun Young's background. As the two entered the abandoned house, someone suddenly brushed past, startling Gian. Although she wasn't afraid of people, she was very afraid of ghosts. Lee Hyun just smiled at her reaction. They went down to the basement. There was a painting of purgatory there. Lee Hyun said it was the hell of Christian sinners. He discovered something behind the wall. He used a hammer to break down the wall and found a door. Inside was a coffin containing a skeleton. Based on the shape of the bones, Lee Hyun guessed it was the skeleton of a woman. He wanted to hand the examination over to the forensic doctor. Then Lee Hyun wanted to meet someone. It turned out that a woman in the house had been watching them. When taken to the police station for questioning, the woman said she used to work as a maid in that house. She recounted the story of their family. At this point, the forensic doctor took the skeleton away for examination. After finishing his work, he whispered to the skeleton, "Mom, it's been a long time." Unexpectedly, the forensic doctor was the criminal Jun Young that Lee Hyun was looking for. Suddenly, Lee Min walked in and asked, "What would it feel like to see a mother and son reunited after a long time?" Jun Young turned to look at Lee Min with a cold gaze. Then Lee Hyun also arrived at the examination room. Jun Young asked why Lee Hyun found the skeleton and whose skeleton it was. He knew but pretended not to. Lee Hyun honestly replied that someone had led him there. This was the biological mother of someone he was searching for. Lee Hyun still didn't understand Jun Young's purpose in leading them to his family's story. Jun Young explained that perhaps that person was seeking empathy from someone in a similar situation. Lee Hyun scoffed and said that people like him didn't deserve empathy. Jun Young and Lee Min were taken aback. Unexpectedly, Lee Hyun's thoughts were completely different from theirs. The next day, the police found the boy's body. An autopsy determined that he was a victim of domestic or school bullying. His parents then came to claim the body. Both were extremely distressed, but Lee Hyun sensed something was wrong. These two people were dressed very elegantly, while their son was wearing ordinary clothes. Either they were playing the role of his parents, or the boy was being abused at home. From the mother's words, the police learned that the boy was frequently abused at school. The police arrived and apprehended several delinquent students who regularly abused others, bringing them in for questioning. They tried to escape, but none could get away. In the interrogation room, the delinquent students remained silent, waiting for the police to find evidence before confessing. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun was observing the boy's family. After his death, his parents didn't seem particularly distressed. Lee Hyun took them to the police station for questioning again. This time, they hired a lawyer. At this point, Lee Hyun offered his reasoning. Actually, the boy's parents wanted him dead because he was only adopted. The evidence showed that even though the boy told his parents he was being bullied at school, they didn't care at all. He disappeared for an entire night, but there were no calls or texts. Instead of saying the parents were heartless, it's more accurate to say they probably knew their son was dead but still ignored it. The mother recalled her son being bullied by his classmates, his eyes pleading for help, but she didn't bother. Now their true colors were revealed. They told Lee Hyun to provide evidence. He couldn't believe parents could be so cruel as to abandon their children like that. Hearing this, Lee Min suddenly remembered that when he disappeared, his older brother didn't even look for him. After the interrogation, the two were released. Afterwards, Lee Min went to the room containing the boy's body. He felt immense sympathy for the boy. He was in a similar situation and wanted to help the male student get revenge. He took on the role of lawyer for both of them, but it was all part of a plan. Meanwhile, the police found a security camera in a deserted alley near the crime scene. They saw the male male student being beaten to death by a group of delinquent students. This time, they couldn't deny their guilt anymore. Simultaneously, the police zoomed in on the camera footage and discovered the student's mother was also present at the scene. However, she didn't report anything. The police arrested her for complicity. At this time, Lee Hun brought home a stack of documents. These were documents he obtained after having someone search for his younger brother. He seemed terrified to face the truth. He feared his brother was a murderer. He opened the documents and learned that his brother was lawyer Lee Min. He couldn't believe his brother had been by his side all this time. Lee Hyun regretted not knowing this sooner. He even suspected his brother was someone sent by Jun Young to oppose him. Suddenly, Lee Hyun remembered what Lee Min had said during the interrogation of the deceased boy's parents. Fearing Lee Min would harm the two, Lee Hyun hurriedly got in his car and drove to their house. There, Lee Hyun found another drawing. This time, he was certain. Lee Hyun called Gian to find Lee Min's whereabouts. Then, Lee Hyun went to Lee Min's house and discovered the drawings he had made. Lee Hyun confirmed that this was indeed his younger brother. At this point, Lee Min returned. Lee Hyun apologized for not finding Lee Min sooner. But Lee Min did not forgive Lee Hyun. Lee Min even blamed his brother for Jun Young's abduction. It turned out that Lee Hyun had told Jun Young that he wasn't the monster, but his younger brother was. Unexpectedly, Lee Hyun received a call from Gian informing him that the boy's parents were still alive. Thankfully, his brother hadn't harmed them. Lee Min said not today. Lee Hyun knew that he was the only person Lee Min hated. He told Lee Min to take revenge on him. But how could Lee Min do it? Lee Hyun returned home in anguish. Why did this happen to him? Lee Min stayed behind, equally distressed. That night, Lee Hyun had another nightmare. Gian comforted him, but it turned out she was just dreaming. Lee Hyun helped Gian lie down and poured out his heart. If we knew our loved one was a murderer, what would we do? After Lee Hyun left, Gian woke up. It turned out she had only been pretending to sleep. She had heard everything he said. The next day, she asked him about the night before, whether he had found his younger brother. Was his younger brother the murderer? He didn't want to tell her. Deep down, he still felt guilty towards his brother. However, when Gian encouraged him, Lee Hyun began to admit that he had found his brother. His brother hated him intensely. Perhaps his brother was the murderer. Gian asked if he knew who Jun Young was. Lee Hyun wasn't sure, only that the person was right beside them. Then he led her down to the basement, where his biological father had locked him up years ago. He confessed to his father that he was a monster. To prevent his younger brother from being seen as a monster, his father had locked him up there. But he had told Jun Young about it, causing Jun Young to take his brother away. Gian felt sorry for Lee Hyun. Everything he did was for his brother's good. This was all Jun Young's fault, so he didn't need to blame himself. At that moment, a delivery man came to the police station looking for Lee Hyun to deliver a package, but he wasn't there. The police officer took it for him, and the man threw it onto Lee Hyun's desk. Unexpectedly, a photograph of a murdered person fell out. The police realized the delivery man was acting suspiciously, so they quickly chased after him, but they lost track of him. The police quickly arrived at the scene and found the victim. The captain suspected someone was targeting Lee Hyun, which was why the killer had sent him the murder photos directly. However, they couldn't contact Lee Hyun, so they called Gian. She quickly dragged him along to investigate. After investigation, the police quickly confirmed the victim was an elderly police officer. The suspect was a gangster who had been arrested by Lee Hyun's father and the elderly police officer. He had recently been released from prison. At that time, he and his girlfriend were on the run, but she met with an accident and died. He was arrested and put in a police car, only able to look back. He returned to take revenge on those involved. Now that Gian knew someone was targeting Lee Hyun, she was extremely worried. She told him to stay home and limit going out. He agreed to her request, but he went to see his younger brother. He was trying to mend his relationship with his brother. That night, police officers arrived at Lee Hyun's house to protect him. Seeing this, Gian quickly fled, fearing discovery that they were living together. On the way, she met a forensic doctor who took her home. She discovered he had a secret room that he didn't want anyone inside. He then volunteered to drive her home. Along the way, she told him about her father, hoping for a chance to find him. He decided to give her a big gift. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun reviewed the case his father had investigated previously. After piecing things together, Lee Hyun concluded that the gangster's real target wasn't him, but someone close to him. The gangster wanted his enemy's son, like himself, to witness the death of someone he loved. In other words, Gian was in danger. He called to warn her, telling her the whole story. She was happy to know she was important to him, but he was wrong. The target was Lee Min. The gangster knew Lee Min was Lee Hyun's younger brother. When Lee Min returned home, he was unexpectedly held at knife point by the gangster and abducted. Afterward, the gangster called Lee Hyun, asking if he wanted to witness the death of the most important person in his life. He demanded that Lee Hyun go to Lee Min's place immediately. Worried, Lee Hyun rushed to find Lee Min. At this time, Gian received news that Lee Hyun had suddenly left home. She quickly tracked his location and called the police for assistance. assistance. Lee Min struggled to break free from the gangster's grip. A fight ensued, and Lee Min was accidentally stabbed. The gangster was about to finish Lee Min off when Lee Hyun arrived. He pretended Lee Min wasn't important to him, but the gangster wasn't easily fooled. If he wasn't important, why would he come? The gangster remained determined to kill Lee Min. Suddenly, Gian shot him. Knowing he couldn't do anything more, he quickly fled. Gian immediately chased after him. Lee Hyun stayed behind, heartbroken. Watching Lee Min, he called for an ambulance to the scene. Lee Min was taken to the hospital. Meanwhile, Gian was pursuing the gangster but lost track of him. Her teammates were also searching for him everywhere. Now, the gangster was chasing after Gian, intending to attack her. Luckily, the captain arrived in time, preventing him from acting. He quickly ducked to a corner. Suddenly, someone appeared behind the gangster. This figure was none other than Jun Young. At this time, Lee Hyun was taking care of Lee Min at the hospital. The next day, Lee Min woke up. Seeing his older brother exhausted from taking care of him, he felt a little forgiving towards his brother. Lee Hyun was relieved to see his younger brother unharmed. The police hadn't caught the gangster yet, so Lee Hyun wanted to go and catch him himself. Lee Hyun entrusted his brother's care to a trustworthy person before leaving. Based on the phone number the gangster had called Lee Hyun with earlier, the police quickly located him, but he had been killed using the same method he had used in the crime. Who was responsible? The police had no clues whatsoever. Today was Jian's birthday. Someone sent her a package. The gift she received was a marked map. She seemed to understand something. She wanted everyone to search the marked location. During the search, the police discovered a skeleton. Gian recognized her father's belongings. She was devastated. She knew that the person who gave her this extravagant birthday gift was the criminal Jun Young. Later, the captain told the deputy director that Jian's father had died 19 years ago, around the same time Jun Young escaped from prison. Therefore, he couldn't have been an accomplice. Finally, Gian cleared her father's name. Now the deputy director knew that Gian was his daughter. He was utterly shocked. Because he was the most involved in this matter, he was also the one who concluded the case file. Judging by his expression, he was probably hiding something. At this time, Lee Hyun learned that Gian had found her father's body. Fearing she would be heartbroken, he went to the police station to pick her up and take her home. But he found her incredibly strong. She hadn't shed a single tear. She didn't dare cry in front of everyone. As soon as she got home, she hugged her father's belongings and sobbed uncontrollably. She recalled the beautiful memories of when her father was alive. Lee Hyun sat down and hugged Gian, comforting her. After a while, she decided to avenge her father. Seeing this, Lee Hyun quickly stopped her. He advised her to calm down. He held her tightly to prevent her from causing trouble. If she did that, she would be no different from a murderer like him. After she calmed down, she wanted to see Jun Young's attitude towards causing this on her birthday. He seemed completely unfazed. This only fueled her hatred. She told him that one day she would make the culprit pay. He just nodded cheerfully. The next day, Lee Hyun came to pick up his younger brother. Jun Young tried to stop them, but Lee Min chose to go back with Lee Hyun, so he couldn't do anything. Afterwards, Jun Young went to see the maid who used to take care of him and asked her if separating Lee Hyun and Lee Min was wrong. He said he only wanted what was best for them. There are good things that bad people do that are hard to accept. Now Jun Young understood that he really only wanted a small family with Lee Min and Lee Hyun, but what he had done made that dream impossible. Meanwhile, Lee Hyun's adoptive mother found evidence that could help them expose the criminal Jun Young hiding behind the mask of a forensic doctor. She found fingerprints and information about the person Jun Young was impersonating. Her adoptive mother wanted to tell Lee Hyun about this, but he didn't answer her calls. She sent a text message arranging a meeting. While in the parking garage, she was unexpectedly attacked. Unexpectedly, the attacker was a handsome police officer from Jian's team. After dealing with Lee Hyun's adoptive mother, the officer took the document bag she intended to give to Lee Hyun. Now, Lee Hyun, having received the terrible news, rushed to the scene with everyone else. His adoptive mother couldn't have survived. The parking garage had cameras, but the killer was too well concealed, making identification impossible for the police. Only now did Lee Hyun see his adoptive mother's text message. He knew the killer wanted to conceal Jun Young's identity, but how could he have acted when he was at home with Lee Hyun? Jun Young must have had an accomplice. He was trying to mislead Lee Hyun. Upon returning home, Lee Hyun confided his doubts to his younger brother. Ultimately, who is Jun Young's accomplice? Lee Min tells Lee Hyun that Jun Young not only adopted Lee Min, but also many orphan children. He sees himself in those children and feels immense empathy. Lee Hyun asks a trusted friend to investigate the police department's internal affairs to find out who was once an orphan. He investigates all the information about that person to find the murderer of his adoptive mother. That evening, Lee Hyun arranges to meet Jun Young for drinks. He wants to understand his enemy better. Gian calls Lee Hyun and learns about this, so she wants to seize the opportunity to infiltrate Jun Young's secret room. She asks asks Lee Hyun to stall him for a while. After breaking into the secret room, she finds a notebook containing photos of the children. These are the orphans Jun Young adopted. Suddenly, she notices someone approaching. She quickly snatches a few photos and escapes. Unexpectedly, she encounters Lee Min outside. At this moment, Lee Hyun tries to keep Jun Young occupied. Lee Hyun wants to confirm his identity. Jun Young asks Lee Hyun, "Even now you still don't recognize me?" Lee Hyun says he's 99% certain. Only the final 1% remains before he can be completely sure of Jun Young's identity. Jun Young pulls Lee Hyun's hand and places it on his neck. The main artery isn't beating. He asks if Lee Hyun is completely sure now. Lee Hyun angrily says, "Why did you kill my father? Why did you take my younger brother away?" Jun Young tells Lee Hyun that it was all for his own good. Jun Young fears Lee Hyun will have a difficult life living with a father who considers him a monster. He also won't be able to take care of his monster younger brother. But Lee Hyun doesn't need any of that. Jun Young is the one who stole the happiness from his small family. Jun Young wants to wait for Lee Hyun to calm down before continuing the conversation, but Lee Hyun didn't want to let Jun Young go. Jun Young knew Lee Hyun's intentions. Seeing that he had been exposed, Lee Hyun reluctantly let him go. At this point, Lee Min stopped Gian. She wanted him to let her go for the sake of his brother. She wanted Lee Min not to help Jun Young anymore. Fortunately, Lee Min was understanding, so he let her go. When she went outside, she met Lee Hyun. He was extremely worried about her safety. Now, Lee Min and Jun Young sat down to talk. Lee Min knew that it was Jun Young who had separated him and his brother, not Lee Hyun who had abandoned him, as Jun Young had previously claimed. At this time, Jun Young asked Lee Min if he was sure that the two of them would have a peaceful life. Would his brother accept what he had done? Lee Min didn't know, but one thing was certain: he would be better off living with Lee Hyun than with Jun Young. That was the truth. Lee Min and Lee Hyun became closer and closer. Today, Lee Hyun came to pick Lee Min up from work. Lee Min had just finished handling a sexual assault case. His client was a young man accused of assaulting his girlfriend. The accuser was the girlfriend's uncle. Lee Min won the case and defended his client. The young man looked at his girlfriend's uncle with hatred in his eyes. The man seemed to be avoiding him. That evening, Lee Hyun reviewed the case and noticed a necklace around the victim's neck. Coincidentally, it matched the ring the uncle was wearing. Lee Hyun understood the story. The uncle was the one who assaulted his niece and then framed the young man. Lee Hyun remembered the young man's eyes. He wanted revenge for his girlfriend. Lee Hyun suspected a murder was imminent, so he quickly called the police. By the time they arrived at the uncle's house, the murder had already occurred. Lee Hyun was one step too late. That night, Jun Young came to see Lee Hyun and handed him his father's diary. It turned out that Jun Young was the one who had taken the diary that year. Through the notebook, Lee Hyun understood his father's anxieties. Now, he had to put himself in that position, caring for someone considered a monster. This wasn't an easy situation to face. Lee Hyun discovered a page missing from the notebook. The content of the next page asked, "Lee Hyun, were you the one who did it?" It seemed Lee Hyun had forgotten something from the past. At this moment, Lee Hyun took out the drawings his younger brother had sent him regarding the cases. He asked his brother what these things meant. Lee Min wanted Lee Hyun to try to remember what he had done. Vague memories began to surface in his mind. The next day, the friend Lee Hyun had asked to investigate the internal workings of the police department, brought the information to the police station. But Lee Hyun was busy taking Lee Min to work, so he asked a colleague to get it for him. The handsome police officer saw this and took the file, even though he didn't know what was inside. He took it into the restroom and opened it to look inside. Inside, there was evidence that could expose him as an accomplice to the criminal Jun Young. He accidentally dropped the photo, and a colleague outside picked it up. The colleague saw that the photo resembled the one Gian was investigating and suspected the person in the photo was a police informant. The colleague put the photo aside and hid to see who it was. When he realized it was a handsome police officer, he wanted to tell Gian, but hesitated to report his colleague. The colleague arranged to meet the handsome officer on the rooftop to persuade him to confess, but to no avail. So, the colleague pointed a gun at his friend, and a fight ensued. At this point, Lee Hyun also discovered the identity of the police informant. He and others ran to find the handsome officer. When they reached the rooftop, they saw the two officers fighting. Everyone rushed to stop them. Lee Hyun was about to pick up his gun to fire a warning shot, but as soon as he held it, all his memories flooded back. He couldn't handle the shock and fainted. Finally, he remembered his forgotten past. That day, the criminal his father had caught broke into their house and murdered his mother. He found the gun in his father's pocket and shot the killer, seriously injuring him. Due to the recoil, Lee Hyun hit his head on the floor and lost his memory. His father had concealed this so that he could have a clean past. Only Lee Min remembered it clearly. But Lee Min was a monster, so he felt nothing for this horrific story. Lee Hyun woke up startled from his nightmare. He felt extremely distressed. Gian hugged Lee Hyun, comforting him that it wasn't his fault. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, the police were questioning the handsome police officer, hoping he would realize his mistake and testify against Jun Young. But he didn't confess anything, so everyone was very disappointed. That evening, Gian went to find Jun Young. She couldn't hold back any longer and wanted him to confess all his crimes. Otherwise, she wouldn't forgive him. But this was just a threat. If she did that, she would turn into a monster like Jun Young. Realizing this, Jun Young challenged Gian to see what she could do to him. He knew she had another purpose in coming here. She intended to record the conversation as evidence. He overpowered her, stole her phone, and deleted the recording. Jun Young nearly strangled Gian to death. Luckily, the captain arrived to rescue her. He also knew that the forensic doctor was the criminal Jun Young. He was a disgusting monster. He stubbornly insisted that what he was doing was helping abused children. The captain told him to look in the mirror and see if he was still human. After saying that, the captain took Gian away. The next day, Lee Hun came to find Jun Young to continue persuading him to turn himself in. But he wanted to take Lee Min and Lee Hyun away. He promised to live peacefully with them from now on and not kill anyone anymore. But Lee Hyun disagreed. Those who do wrong must pay for their mistakes. Lee Hyun grabbed Jun Young by the collar and warned him not to try to take his brother away. Lee Min, overhearing the whole conversation, knew his brother was trying to protect him, so he told Jun Young to leave him and his brother alone. Jun Young knew he couldn't stop him and felt helpless, so now he just wanted to do the things a normal family would do together: go for walks and spend time together. That evening, someone came looking for Jun Young. It was the child Jun Young had adopted who wanted revenge for his parents. At that moment, Jun Young realized that helping abused children, killing their families for them, and then adopting them might not be what those children needed. Jun Young remembered the saying that bad people trying to do good might not necessarily get good results. Everyone has their place in life. Jun Young didn't want to argue with the other boy. When he returned home, Lee Min was already there waiting. Lee Min wanted to end it all himself. He then attacked Jun Young. The two began fighting. Jun Young gained the upper hand and stabbed the man he had raised for 20 years, whom he considered his own son. Lee Min was severely wounded and fell. Now Lee Hyun, discovering Lee Min had left the house, rushed to Jun Young's house. Witnessing his brother's critical condition, he tried to revive him, but all his efforts were in vain. Enraged, Lee Hyun lunged at Jun Young, grabbing him by the neck. Unexpectedly, the maid attacked him from behind, knocking him unconscious. When Lee Hyun woke up, the room was empty. Lee Min's death had become a murder case with no body found. After much effort, they finally managed to persuade the handsome police officer to testify against Jun Young. Early the next morning, Jun Young arranged to meet Lee Hyun. He revealed the reason why he had always been so stubborn with Lee Hyun. Just because of a single sentence Lee Hyun said when he was a child, greeting his uncle differently from everyone else. Lee Hyun wants Jun Young to return Lee Min, whether he's alive or dead. When Lee Hyun learns his younger brother is in the hospital, he comes there, giving him a new identity. Lee Hyun wants Lee Min to live his own life from now on. Afterward, both Jun Young and Lee Hyun disappear. A year later, Lee Hyun returns as a prosecutor. He and Gian then begin a happy romance. Where did the criminal Jun Young go after that? The film ends. See you in the next videos. Goodbye.